Hello. Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Paige Johnston. I'm the Associate Director of Public Programs here at the GSD. I want to start tonight by acknowledging that the GSD is located on the traditional and ancestral land of the Massachusetts, the original inhabitants of what is now known as Boston and Cambridge. We pay respect to the people of the Massachusetts tribe, past, present, and future, and honor the land itself, which remains sacred to the Massachusetts people. The school also recognizes the work of the Harvard University Native American program in cultivating the relationships that led to the creation of this acknowledgement. A quick reminder that we have closed captioning for our virtual audience. To enable captions, click the CC box at the bottom of the live stream window. I also want to invite you to our final public program of the fall semester. This Thursday, November 16th, we will celebrate the opening of Our Artificial Nature, which is the exhibition currently on view in the Drucker Design Gallery. And we will celebrate it with an event featuring the founding director of the Center for Green Buildings and Cities, Ali Malkawi, the exhibition's curator, Elizabeth Cristoforetti, GSD alumnus and inaugural director of the Emilio Ambas Institute at MoMA, Carson Chan, plus the GSD's own Grace Law and Antoine Picone. For more information about that program, please visit the GSD's website, and please stop by the Drucker Design Gallery to see the exhibition. Now I'll hand it over to Gary Hilderbrand, Chair of the Landscape Architecture Department, who will introduce tonight's speaker.
Good evening. Thank you, Paige, and thanks to Raquel and Matt and the events team, always producing great support for our public events. It's my great honor this evening to introduce Catherine Mosbach for this semester's Aga Khan lecture. The event is supported by the Aga Khan program at GSD, which is part of the Aga Khan program for Islamic architecture at Harvard and MIT. Dedicated to the study of Islamic art and architecture, urbanism, landscape architecture, and conservation. Catherine is with us at GSD this semester as the Aga Khan visiting critic in landscape architecture. Catherine is a founder of the Paris-based landscape architecture firm Mosbach Paysagistes. I'll mention just a few of the most highly visible projects. You know them, including the Botanical Garden of Bordeaux, the Phase Shifts Park in Taichung, Taipei, with Philippe Ram, and the Louvre Lens Museum Park with Sanaa. Her project, In the Net of Desires with Ovo Studio, explored the infinitesimal of the living for the 21st Triennale in Milan in 2017. And there are many notices and awards, including the Rosa Barbara Prize of 2003, and Catherine was named a Knight of the Legion of Honor by the President of the Republic, François Hollande, in 2016. Catherine's title tonight is this: Design is a Language, Being Receptive in Motion. What does it mean? The words that accompany the title begin with drawing, which is a way of interrogating a site for her and drawing out a narrative. Then she says this: what would be our sensitive imprint if we gave up on interpretation, on the subtle interplay between the eye, sensitivity, and the raw material of a world that we look at and that looks back on us? What would this imprint-trace-landscape-desire be if we gave up drawing, an instrument of open dialogue, revealing the living ongoing, which teaches us and helps us to evolve in our relationship with the host land and the beings who inhabit it? What would it be if we gave that up? This suggests to me a state of being and perhaps a kind of empowerment to read a site, to get a thing in motion, and yet not be in control of all the forces that act upon it. Again, in her words, quote, "Only a revelation of possibilities is in the project." It's this sensibility that has evolved over years in a kind of practice that accepts the inevitability of time and change and the forces that continue to work on landscapes long after we've made a certain imprint. In this, there is both strength and humility. Strength in the belief that we can commit to reading and predicting potential embodiments, and humility in the recognition that we're not fully in control of the outcomes. Elsewhere, she has said this: we all live in the state of knowledge and the tools we have in our times. We understand that the global behavior of all populations together won't fit with the needs of other life on Earth. So we need to introduce a more subtle dialogue between our human system and other systems. But we can only use the tools from our timeline with enough flexibility to embrace what we do not know and survive by being as efficient as possible. That doesn't mean no language, no exploration, no risk or creativity. If we only had to efficiently apply what we know, we could give the task to a device. It's a common statement today. Programmed to achieve technical goals. If no human thought or effort or sensibility is necessary, it means no more civilization. So I'd like to provide a little context for where and how this kind of thinking might have come from, how it might have evolved in Catherine's formation. She'll tell us whether I have it right or not. Catherine received her diploma in landscape architecture from the ANSP, l'École Nationale Supérieure du Paysage, at Versailles. ANSP was created in 1976, born out of the National School of Horticulture in France. In 1977, one of France's leading landscape architects, Michel Courgeot, began teaching there. He led the program for more than 2 decades. Courgeot was a singular teacher who demanded intellectual clarity and design courage from his students. His teaching produced, if I can say it this way, a few offspring. A prodigious generation, really, of thinkers and practitioners that includes Michel Devine, the late Yves Brunier, and Catherine Mosbach. The school became a phenomenon like no other, with Courgeot as the strongest advocate and activist for landscape architecture in France, and with notables including Jacques Simon, Jacques Coulon, Alexandre Chemetov, Monique Moser, later Christophe Giraud. They created a head of steam for a field that was massively productive and I would say audacious at that time. In the same year as she founded Mosbach Paysagistes, 1978, Catherine also organized the review Paige Paysage with colleagues Marc Claremont and Pascal Jacotot. I treasure my dog-eared issues of Paige Paysage. And I see they sell for hundreds of dollars on eBay. Get them if you can. In the pages of the early reviews, you would see the emerging work of the editors themselves, why wouldn't you? But also works by Devine, Giraud, Jacqueline Osti, Yves Brunier, Henri Bava and his partners before they formed Agence Terre, Enrique Badier and Joan Roig, João Gomes de Silva, Catherine Gustafson, the American working in Paris and later in London, and other occasional Americans, such as George Hargreaves, Peter Walker, Martha Schwartz, along with the more senior French designers, Courgeot, Simon, and Chemetov. Here was their mission, quoting now: "The purpose behind the review Paige Paysage is to present scientific research as well as technical and artistic projects from varied cultural horizons. It wants to show the existence of a corpus of landscape in the making." Corpus usually refers to a body of text, but I think we might also take it here to mean a collection of landscape works or a collective of landscape producers. In the late 80s and 90s, this was a force field, persuading the world that a discipline that had professionalized 100 years before in the US was also inevitable for Europe, if European cities were going to expand or rebuild in a way that left valuable and essential parts of the territory and the terrain intact. Catherine's projects, publications, exhibitions, competition entries, and more were at the center of this force field. That formation was formidable, and the work of her that her firm is producing today still echoes with that force, at least I think so. But I suspect Katrine wants to talk about now rather than then, so let's give her the floor. Please welcome.
Bonsoir. Good evening. Thank you for introduction. I am very pleased to share some landscape experiences and hope to motivate some talent in the audience to go further. Water channel is one important scope for landscape design. The way we go from the way we share the water from the head to the feet, the way we manage the lift from the roots to the sky. So mainly it's evaluated like a drama. In France at that time there are many cities overfloated. Landscape design has the power to invest that element to enjoy the different variations through the season. The other element more important as the water is the light, the volume of light, how the clouds share and transform the light through the thickness, how the humidity of the air is transformed on drops. So both light and water are key elements for landscape design. And then is a way we play with to make it a positive experience more than a dramatic experience as is more relevant. So I will invite you through 5 competition design project, loosened competition, but very efficient as experience, and 3 build project. When you draw a line on the earth or on the paper, the line will catch differently the water and the light, included the microorganism. So means you engage very precisely the way to welcome what is not linked to your action. That is the main subject of landscape. Then it is linked to the time you take to learn about the local singularity and how you translate the local singularity to manage your design process. So let's begin with a desertic area. Art Maildoa was a competition done with Rice and Lipka from New York. So desertic area, very hard way to survive. It is a mile factory, so it means it's a renewal, a building renewal. Here you have the construction stage from the museum from Jean Nouvel, no finalized. And the scope was really an hybridization between architecture and landscape. When we invest a place, we always try to understand the link from the place, from the facility to the urban scale. So it's not a floating facility in between nothing, it's always linked to the global urban scale. That's an important thing, an important scope. And at the same time, not only on the urban scale, but on the whole landscape mood from the whole peninsula here, Qatar. To understand from where the plants are coming from, how they survive in the very difficult condition, because we are desertic condition. Then only when we understand all those background, we propose, as we said before, the hard condition between light and lack of water, because it's 40 degrees in regular time. And we invest the design process to share all polarities between the shore, so the pebble from the sea side, from the Gulf, and the earth. Sharing the light, not to be able to live under 40 degrees Celsius, sharing the lack of water so that the plants can evolve, with a very spontaneous planting process, and all that together to welcome animals, vegetal, and human. It gives such kind of design, so you can see, you don't see specifically the difference between architecture and landscape on the ground floor. and linked to the shore. So the main subject here, as engaged at the introduction, is how to share the water, because the water is sparse. It's the way to pick up the salty waters from the Gulf, transform it, to use it to climatization for the rooms, and transform it to safe water for the planting in the thickness of the gardens. In general, in such kind of countries, the water comes from above, and as it's very hot on the sky, 40 degrees, it's a shock for the plants. So the only way to be smooth is to bring the water from the thickness of the soil, so that it's the same temperature on the roots and helps the plants growing delicately. That's the link between infrastructure, architecture, and landscape to play on the same level, so that at the end there is no difference between technique and places for welcoming different user and different behavior. Very rough in front of the seashore and very dense planting beside on the earth side. Another place in desertic is in Saudi Arabia. Again, a renewal from an auto Frey building, a diplomatic building opening to a kind of boutique hotel. Here too, you can see the power between the play between the wind and the sand. So the dynamic of flows, the power in front of the city development on a wadi. Once more is to understand the specific condition and singularity of the place. You can see the building is on the red dots. So very, very specific place over the wadi. So the question here is to how it works with a very, very sparse humidity, how you catch the humidity of the air, the water flows, to bring into domestic uses and to bring back life on the places. So we use as much as we can to transform the water coming from the clouds, but not only, to catch it and to bring it in the thickness of the earth, for the domestic uses and for the plants irrigation. So by sure it needs to be linked to the wind movement because to protect the living settlement from the wind and the dry system, and to be in a much more comfortable situation as usual. So all that is by sure combined with all those parameters: wind, dry soil, and hard sun. The question is not to say we like or we don't like auto Frey building. The question is to find a dialogue between existing condition in the environment and existing condition with a specific design process, architecture process. So we develop with a series architect from London. So a very enclosed system, as you can see on the left, to an open system, as you can see on the right, both for architecture and both for landscapes, as a cells propagation. That is before, so the building floating in between hard soil and parking plots, and all around is just dry and nothing. And transformed to a life system all around, so an open system, catching all organic and chemical power from all around to introduce life for people and for plants and for animals. So you can see that the dialogue with the existing is quite delicate, and we emphasize the resources and larges on the whole area, so that it's the new inhabitants and the existing inhabitants are in a very delicate cohabitation. In another world, in a much more continental climate, we are in Switzerland, so in inverse, the water is here much more abundant, and the question was to work with the melting snow at spring and the overfloating in regular life without drama. The program here is an industrial campus, so it means a place for students to play with helicopter, with such kind of modeling and prototype. Again, here we are in the Alps, so very high level topography, and in a valley. You can see the link through the roads and the planting roads through the valley, and all around very high level of topography. The place of the project is in the cross, the Red Cross. And as said, the brief of the program asks to manage the overfloating water level on the melting snow spring level in regular life without drama. The existing buildings are on the north, and the new building is a rectangle on the east side. So to understand how to manage it without drama, we learn about how it works in the Alpian. So it means how the path for the cows and for the animals goes through the meadows, and how when it's a high level water, all those channels manage the flows coming from the head of the mountains to the valley. We just inspire with that system, with that very spontaneous system, to propose the very specific design all around the building, existing building, and bringing the water with a channel means in regular life is sparse, going through the meadows, and when it's high level water at the spring, it becomes river, bringing the water to the existing river on the south. That is a way to use the landscape design as a morphing design, in both linked to whatever season happened. It's a positive event to bring the people nearby the life of the environment. You can see on the right the dry season, means it's just benches, passes between the meadows, and when it's spring, it becomes a river, bringing the water spontaneously to the lowest part. It's done by Brüder from Paris and Bauco from Belgium. Yeah, I discovered that the architect I present here are all teacher, visiting professor here, so it's maybe not random. Another architecture school in Zurich, again with Brüder and Bauco. I am used to work mainly on large scales, and this is really a tiny place between a historical building in the historical city center from Zurich. So when you are very limited place, you need to find alternative way to bring open space and I mean the dynamic of environment in contact with a building. So the way we found is that the building itself becomes a landscape. It was linked to the way we bring to knowledge how we understand the place from Zurich, again, very nearby to the Alpian. And we try to understand what the plants, the trees, in the lowest part of the city center. So we are really in the city center, and the odor is really thin. How the plants bring precise climatic condition and how it evolves to the neighborhood. So here we are on the west, in front of the hospital wind by Chris and Gantenbein. And each level from the building bring his own shadow and his own garden's condition for specific planting. We go from the ground floor to the roof, and at the end, that's the building. And at the end, it looks like a garden. Inside the building, it's the same. The way you go from one level to the other, you move through different places and different link between inside and outside. We lose the competition. We discover later that all architects vote for that draft, but the politics were really afraid because there's nothing to do with historical typologies. So when we bring an alternative way to introduce a dialectic between architecture and landscape, we need to have very powerful architects in the jury member to convince the politics that it's an opportunity to go away from very traditional way to build. The winner was Hertog-and-de-Meuron, but sorry, it's quite a traditional way to engage dialectic between architecture and landscape. Let's go to built experiences with Louvre Lens. That's a larger scale, a mine pit, with a very, very poor land linked to the economy drop down with a stop with the exploration of the mine. That experience is really relevant, linked to the what I said before. We lose in Zurich, but here we win because it was a really, really good architect's advisor in Louvre in Paris, who struggled a lot to bring that competition we win with Sana, very abstract, very conceptual, so not at all traditional way to represent architecture as a monument, as Versailles, or such kind of things. And I insist on that level because, as you might know, when it's a competition for a Louvre in a country, it's first a competition for the cities to propose a land. And that city wins the competition because it was an opportunity to bring together landscape and architecture on the same level, because the plots were 25 hectares in land very poor, so it was an opportunity that a cultural facility engaged an urban renewal on 4,000 hectares. I go through the design process, but the land is just a little bit bizarre with this rail from east to west. And it was a work of the landscape investment on the whole territory. We work 1 month before and send every week to Sana in Tokyo our landscape translation, and how we return the very bizarre shaping and limiting of the place to engage an open system in connection with the whole city gardens all around and the whole territory. So it means it's 11 entrances. We use the rider seams as the entrance of the further facility, and the building, the museum in the heart of the place becomes a public space, a lobby, and not a building just as a monument. So it's a much more traveling system going through the different timelines from the coal industry to the spontaneous plants investment and to the cultural level. Then all the design, I don't go as much in the detail, but it's linked to the poor soil and the whale, again, to catch the water, to keep all the water on the place, and so that the chemical and biological work welcome the mouses and all the vegetation system. So it means each time when we have a brief, it's very, very precisely done, but then the interpretation is total linked to the way you understand the global process of the land transforming. Main part of the museum is on the basement. It's very horizontal architectural development. So the silt coming from the basement is transformed to the fence. They ask us to make a very hard defense system because pieces of art are very expensive. So it would not be the possibility to break down and to go and to store the pieces. So we take the steel from the cut and fill from the basement, and to put as a system of a fence, but as a landscape system, not as a defense system. That material never sees the sun and the rain. It takes just some months, it was August 2012, to expose to the sun and to the light to engage the work of the biologic system with the spontaneous mosses. We expected mosses on the head, but never on the vertical facade. So all those comes along just by exposing the material to the light and to the water. On the same time as is very fragile, the mine factory is very fragile, so it means you have a lot of holes and a lot of galleries underneath. They ask us to keep all rainwater on the place. And at the same time, with Sana, we wanted to have a museum floating in landscape, but it's a lot of raining in north of France, and it was not possible to take shoes with dirty shoes and going to the painting and bringing parasites to the painting. So we need to negotiate the percentage between mineral and vegetal, and the only way I found is to use the joints to catch all water, to infiltrate the water on place. So is no water going in the urban network because it was too fragile. And all what you see in the joints is coming like as the fan spontaneously. So that's what I say, the thickness of the line. You see the line, the joints of concrete, because concrete need recessed joints, is 2 centimeter and more 20 centimeter, and the thickness of the line, the thickness of the drawing on gauge, the thickness of the life process. All that comes along. We do nothing. Then it is just the problem with the hygienist system, as is the Louvre, as is the brand. It need to be cleaned. So that is a contradiction with the cleaning system of the concrete and with the spontaneous organic life, because the organic life doesn't like the chemical product to clean the concrete. So that's just the way it need to be negotiated to accept that it is not hygienic as it should be in 21 centuries. Going through, we speak about the water drops and the volume of light. You can see that is a lot of rain north of France. So somehow when it's a lot of rain and when it's foggy, you don't see the difference between the soil and the facade, which is the power of that settlement is whatever season you go, you never discover the same, which is really a gift for me for the visiting. So when it's a lot of raining, the drops becomes lakes or small ponds. When it's a lot of fogs, everything is dissolved and you don't know if you are inside, outside, and where you are. You have the reflection of the surrounding, and suddenly you are in another world. And that's the power of the landscape and of the thickness of the line. You see, concrete becomes a pond, and there is many different ways to move your body through the different spaces. That's the mine pit, one main place we are not allowed to make fill because it's fragile. It's always under control because it's many holes underneath. And all those trees come spontaneously, so the only thing we have done is plaza all around, and the delicate way to go all around the trees, because we could not imagine to cut away the existing trees just to put new system. And it's a very powerful place because it is the only place you can see from west to east without a link between the previous ages and the previous way to invest the place and the today places. Another spontaneous is the mosses when it's humid on the soil, and so for me it's just fantastic because it transforms everything. It's the power of the plants. When you do nothing and when you don't clean, they take the power, and which is great for landscape architecture. Not all people like, but for me it's just, I just supply all. Please don't clean, don't touch. It's magic. But okay. That's a huge discussion between regular hygienist vision and life vision. Let's go through Taiwan project. So one more tropical humid, so the opposite as the previous competition project. So here the question is too much water, but too much water in one way, but less water for domestic life. We win the competition with Hilderbrand 2012, and it was. We have really two different backgrounds. So Hilderbrand is really invest in climatic devices and climatic experimentation, and I am much more invest in thickness of soil and biological life and management of the water system. So since the beginning, we share together two different ways to invest the program. It was the urban planning was done from Standard as a U.S. architect. It was a competition, and it was a question it's like Central Park but smaller. It's 70 hectares. To propose a park for 250 hectares urban development. So the park first and the urban development next. And it was a question to manage all rainwater from the whole district infiltrated in the soil. So the way we manage it is to make, it was a previous airport, sorry, I don't precise. Even if it's 2.7 kilometers, even if it's an airport, it's 1% slope. So you have 12-meter difference from north to south. And the only way to catch the water and keep on place for monsoon season is to balance cut and fill by proposing infrastructure and bridges and tunnel to allow full footprint from north to south without interruption from traffic. So in monsoon season, it's a possibility to 80% of the park full of water. In regular season, it's just some small pond because they ask a small lake. It's 1 hectare. It's small for them, but so you have a real power of morphing from the same place when it's monsoon season and when it's just regular life and without drama. So just regular life. To see how the impact of the season transform public space. Then we have different places because, like in desertic climate, people are not used to spend time outside. So we cannot spend 70 million euro public space, and people spend the weekend and the holidays in shopping mall. So we need to find a way to engage lands more comfortable with using trees with large leaves, more comfortable a little bit far away for the water ponds with leaves catching the water from the air. So it's just transition, but even if it's much more far away from the ponds, and places for children much more far away from the traffic and less polluted. So all that is managed combining the quality of the soil with the quality of the plants and the biological work of the plants, both together to bring places to welcome people to spend more time outside in the park. So I don't go in detail, but we were lucky to have existing plants transplanting with ficus. So they are very, very, at the early beginning on the park, you might know that the trees are very thin and are not able to produce the result we are expected. So we were lucky to have more than 1,000 existing trees we transplanted on places to engage the planting process. And we try to make rhythms because in tropical humid the seasons are really, it's not as much difference as in Occident. So to make different rhythms so that people are much more sensitive on the season's rhythm. In addition, with the work of the plants and the soils, we put a sensor every 50 grids to catch the real temperature and the real level of humidity and the level of pollution, all translated in a maintenance center on the north of the park in real time so that they can react very efficiently on real life to know what happened on each place. In addition, with the comfort lands, 15 comfort lands for leisure, sport, and playground, it was a request of the Maya to invest fields for linked to Rudolf Steiner philosophy. What was not easy with that project, more than Louvre-Lens, it's 70 hectares, and all square meter was precisely drawn and defined to get the result and the performing we wanted to get to catch the water, and to invest much more comfortable places to welcome people and plants and animals, which is a little bit crazy at that level, but okay, we have done it, and quite So it means the life process is engaged and to be independent and continue to emphasize the power of the natural work. In addition, it was requested to have 1 hectare photovoltaic cells in front of 900 parking plots. By sure, when you ask 900 parking plots to a landscape architect, you don't want to do the same as shopping mall. And we do the best. It looks like a park more than parking plots. So it's ahead of the park, so when you are over, it's just a little bit abstract, like you are on the moon. And when you go from north to south, south is the city center. It's a very early beginning. It's 2019, before the opening 2012. And the gift of that park is it's really hybridization between different strata. We see later with the sketches. And you have really different visibility by monsoon season and by regular season. In addition, as explained, we propose those infrastructure to balance cut and fill, and not only to have full walking from north to south, but each one is approx 1 hectare. So it's like when you go through, it's like you go in a cathedral very spontaneously, you are in fresh air without doing nothing, without any artificial climatization. And in addition, you have a very good sound reflection, so it's very positive to make artistic event and orchestra and spontaneous music event. You can see that it's crossing the traffic to absorb the traffic. And so the cab are not the main subject here. It's just very temporary passage. But at the final, it's a very comfortable public space, invest by day and by night. In landscape strategy, what is very important that one design has to propose a different solution, not only for one subject. So he has to be polyvalent. And you can see that the way the people use the places is a kind of a gift. They understand that you offer them places to have freedom and to involve different behaviors they are not used to have in a traditional public space in urban context. That's for me the best gift when you see the behavior of the people moving through the places. The small sketches to show that the landscape strategy is always an hybridization between different ways to manage the technical brief, so the lithosphere design, the atmosphere design, the hydrosphere, because we always need more than ever to manage and to share the water. Even if it's monsoon, the water table was as low, there is a need to cut the drinking water for the city because they cut all trees from the mountains, so all the water is running directly to the sea, and no more water table to have just regular domestic drink water. So even you have a lot of rain, it's always linked to the way to manage the way you catch the water, the way you share the water, and what you do with that the hydraulic lift goes on both sides, from the sky to the earth and from the roots to the sky back. The biosphere is all phytoremediation to clean the water coming from the whole city. So no, the city is not 100% built. It will take maybe 10 or maybe in Taiwan is going fast, like in China, maybe 10 years. So the park was delivered 2020, so maybe in 2030, all around will be with a lot of towers and housing and offices. So the horizon will change a lot. Even we have more than 1100,000 trees growing by sure through the timeline. The horizon will change when all around the city will be built up. And by sure, it's not only a place for plants and animals and people, it welcomes cultural facility with the Museum of Sana on the northeast. I think it will through near from the end and maybe the opening, and a conventional centers on the north. So we are always mainly in the main current is the opposition between ecology and culture, which is not possible in a landscape strategy. We cannot be in opposition between the natural system and the cultural system. We need to find a link to bring it together with both architecture, landscape, and infrastructure. Just before the two videos, the landscape strategy and the design process works on the very large scales, but it's the same at the very small scale. It's a very small pocket garden in Ulsan, in Korean, in the arm of a river. And just some pictures to show that if we take care on the hybridization on the event between seeds. On the left, it's University of Paris. It's just raining spring and seeds of bushes with asphalt. And on the right is the walk between wind and pebbles and wintertime when it's frozen. So even you can see that the spontaneous element work together to propose hybridization between the different elements. We discovered by doing that work that in the previous century, an hydraulic shows that makes the demonstration, the scientific demonstration that the dynamic of flows, it's absolutely similar in the heart of the human that in the formation of the Alps. So we are as natural as the Alps, and the dynamic of flows works absolutely similarly, which was really inspiring to propose for that small garden. It's quite a 500 square meter, so nothing. And you can see, linked to my primary introduction, that without computer, without pencil, the people, the previous humans, use pteroglyph to express their emotion on the rocks directly. So if they do that in previous ages, we are supposed to do as well as they have done without the same devices. Then it was again an existing river, but with hard edges as done everywhere to control the overfloating. And we propose with that small pocket garden a kind of prototype to show how we can make hybridization between hard edges and fluent edges, just again to catch the biological life, to bring back in contact with the human. That's the context, and we were really, really surprised. We could not follow the construction because far away. We say at the beginning, and maybe we can come back at the discussion, that to engage a high-level landscape production, we need a courageous client, by sure inspiring architect, landscaper, and engineers, but on the same level, very good companies. And I was really impressed with the precision that workers do, and I have a great respect because it was not easy. Even if it's 500 square meter, they do very precisely the drawing I give without any not under my control. That's really, really sparse. I discovered at the end of the Taiwan project that nobody could read my plans. So I don't know how they manage on the real life, on the construction place, but so sometimes it happens the companies read carefully the plans. I go through to respect the time, and before opening the exchanges with you, I propose the two extremities, so really to say that the design process has nothing, is not linked to the scale. It has exactly the same strategy if it's a very large scale or a very small pocket, even a micro pocket. So I propose you to go through the two video with a large scale of, maybe not as large, but Taiwan, 70 hectares. And with the experience we have done, Trinal Milano, with a micro scale, we can come back why we do that installation linked to the problem we get on Louvre construction stage. Maybe you should shut down the light. Suis la tige, elle t'emmène à la fleur. Accroche-toi à ma branche, je te hisse. Hurle pas fort, je suis Marche, du atmest für dich. Tu me casses mes aiguilles, respire. Hurle pas fort, je suis grosse. Das sind alle die Accroche-toi à ma branche, je te hisse. Lavora all'estremo di te stesso, poi tu devi fare che je suis Guarda davanti a te, il ramo della vista. Ça bouge pas, viens voir qui c'est. Tu me casses mes aiguilles. Achtung zur Seite, die Pflanzen mich strömt. Nasconde la vista che mi guarda.
Fa quello c'è insieme.
Entrefile du désir. Tu me casses mes aiguilles. Prends soin de mes feuilles. Folge dem Zwerg. Bringst uns der Region. Schick das Werk. Uns beim Arbeiten zuhören können. Wie so Merci.
Thank you. I'm feeling a little speechless after that last film. My God, it's immersive. But I would like to make two observations and then ask you a question, and this gives you all time to formulate your own questions. The first one is the presence of moisture in everything you do. I think I could describe the work really as a kind of excursus in either the abundance of moisture and its presences as clouds or drops of rain or floods, and absences of water, such as drought or, let's say, the dry condition that you show in design. And I don't know that I've encountered a body of work like you've shown, which could really be described as a kind of assay into the presence of moisture and how we might deal with it or frame it or use it or prevent harm from it. So that's the first observation. It's really about moisture. And of course, moisture is essential to life. The second one is that I would just love to take the slides and only take the plan drawings. Because I think no matter whether it's at the scale of, the floor in front of us, the pebbles, or the scale of the geographic scale, you somehow find a way in plan drawing to lose the boundary between building and landscape. And you said this several times as a kind of thesis for yourself. And I think as a collection of drawings, it's also something maybe I haven't quite seen before. Beautifully, carefully drawn. A lot of work to do that. It makes a beautiful collection in itself. I'd like to ask about the Rudolf Steiner 12 senses. I think you said that you were asked to embark on that exercise, right? And then you chose a number of those as like generators of the spaces of the park in Taichung. On the other hand, so that maybe was that an enlightened client thinking about how people would experience this vast central park. But my question really is, because you have such a deep attachment to the ruderal and the incidental and the unpredictable and the spontaneous, do you find that it's difficult to convince clients to embark on that journey? It's brave. It's brave.
There are many questions. If we begin at the end, okay. Yeah, because mainly behavior in our today life is not maybe for landscaper, but in general. So outside is a background. So it's just a scene. And a human is just above the scene. And so that's just bizarre because it makes you a distance between what is not you. And yeah, sure, that's the first one. The second one is, in general, the request is everything needs to be over-controlled, what is crazy. And it's linked to the hygienist spirit of our today life. But it's just in opposition with everything we should do to be careful, even with our body and the way our body interacts with what is not us. So when you, and the second is people are afraid with emptiness, with what people in general, so in the client. So if it not everything is under control, it's just, okay, so what do we do? If it's empty, so it's nothing if it's empty. Empty is a weakness for them. For me, it's a power. So it's the only way to see the lights, the clouds, the rain and everything. Yeah, that's a huge question linked to the brief and the request the client asks. And it's our responsibility to convince them that no, it's not a problem not to control. It's the way we engage the dialectic with the brief, because it's always a brief. It's always very technical, precise request, which is normal life. But the way we engage the interpretation of the brief to the existing and possible resources and condition, it's enough. It doesn't need to be more. It doesn't need to be over-controlled. Because if it's over-controlled, you lose all knowledge. You lose everything. I draw a lot. So I know precisely where I'm going. So I can convince, but sure, you need someone besides the client. If not, it doesn't work. And then I have 2 or 3 experiences showing it works. It helps. You cannot do the next step if you have not done the primary step. And I was lucky at the primary step, the briefs were cultural. So when you have cultural briefs, it's much more open for experimentation. You cannot do maybe in the same context, in an urban context. So why I am interested in mosses and moisture? Because in the general spirit, it means that landscape architect is for rich society. I mean, people where economy is good and everything, it's growing and positive. But the first life on Earth is come from the cyanobacteria, it comes from the mosses. So if you want to cultivate it and nourish and cultivating the life, you need to begin with a basic element, water, light, and cyanobacteria, and then you engage without you. Because we are just going through, and then we go, and even a project is 7 to 10 years, then you go and it needs to work alone without you. You are not here to control, to say to the garden, you need to do that, you need to do that. It doesn't work. So it's just a way to engage a spontaneous system that is going grow and grow and grow. And yes, I am really, really happy when I see the behavior of the people in the places I do, because, okay, they feel alone, they don't need any explanations, they don't need any narrative, they understand they can be free. And that's the best gift a landscaper can get back, for me.
Yeah, we can see that you're very satisfied by that, and that's great. Honestly, though, I can't help thinking that the expectation typically, on the project management side is like the quantity surveyors have to figure out exactly what they're procuring, and you're telling them, but we're just going to use primitive things, and they must be scratching their heads.
I don't go as much in detail. I just say, okay, because
Here, try this.
you cannot. Not everything is going through the words, You just say, okay, you ask me that and I do it, so believe me, and I do it. I mean, the technical performing, that, if you speak about poetry, they don't care. So you cannot speak about poetry. They don't listen, they don't see. So when I show the pictures in Louvre is a cultural place, isn't it? They discover what I see, but everyone can see it. Just take care and just take time to see. It's just a question of time to be receptive. If you are receptive, you see a lot of things. But if you are not receptive, you have no time, very busy, or you are not interested, you are not receptive. What I see, everyone can see. It's not my imagination. It's just I capture it. No, you cannot speak about poetry. Nobody is interested in poetry.
Maybe at Louvre.
I'm not sure.
Who has a question? Some microphones. The dean has a question.
It was fantastic, and I'm completely taken by the moss taking over the world, and the lack of hygiene is fabulous. Though that's not a message to the school. I was curious about several of the projects take place in incredibly inhospitable environments, and 50 years ago, 60 years ago, those environments were transformed usually by site engineers, who would essentially bring those inhospitable environments into control, and then you could have a landscape that is honestly homogeneous with the rest of the world, and buildings that were somewhat homogeneous with the rest of the world. And what you're doing is introducing the possibility of taking those inhospitable landscapes and making them hospitable. But I wonder, do you ever question if building should ever be enabled in some of those sites? Because you create a landscape that is livable and that works with the possibilities there, but is the project that comes with your landscape a positive contribution to that environment?
I think nothing is in a priori bad. It's always, even for architecture, it's always a way to play with delicately. Maybe it's stupid to say that, but it's always a way of delicateness. I have no problem with any building. It's just when a building is centralized. So the building is a building, and what is not building is not building. So that is a little bit boring, and you learn nothing. When we do the competition of Louvre, the president of the region expected a monument like Bilbao, because a monument means you exist. Sorry, I don't think so, but if you see there is a book, 10 years, it's 10 years Louvre, there is a book and you see all other projects. So they have the same brief as we had, and he wanted that added. So it has nothing to do with, and they struggled, because it's just, spontaneously, when a politics or when a region want a facility like the Louvre, they want something, I don't know, visible or unique, and for politics is architecture. And Saadi struggled with a structural engineer in front of the jury members, so it couldn't fit, so it was a little bit bizarre. And it was the only way the Louvre Paris, with the architect advisor, has the opportunity to say, okay, the only project braving architecture and landscape is that one. But the president of the region, he was sad, because that facility was not, it's not a state facility, it's a region facility. And it was always said, and even when it was done, he said, okay, it's a factory. They understand nothing. No, you laugh, it's true. In France, that facility was not welcome. Even the journalist said it's a facility, the garden is just nothing. So it means the spirit, the local spirit, it takes a long time to understand the power of a place. No, 10 years later, they say, okay, maybe it's good. Maybe.
I admire your patience.
Yeah, but landscape, it's different as architecture. Architecture, when it's done, you are immediately the result, but then it's always the same. And landscape, it's growing. You can lose it on the same, but it's growing through the ages. So we need to live long time to get back the result. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about a contrast, a really big contrast, because the Bordeaux Botanic Garden is 20 years ago, right? A little more than 20 years ago. And the brief required you to have, 12 landscape types from around the world. And I remember I was on the jury for the Rosa Barba Prize, and the big argument was, well, that kind of botanic garden comes from the age of discovery, and we no longer do that. And Peter Latz was pounding on the table saying, no, a botanic garden has to be in situ. And now your vegetation is all in situ, right? So it's a really big travel you made.
Yeah, and so that's you cannot have the direct result as okay, that is a glass, and it's and you see what you have. So landscape, you just engage, you just open the gate, and then it evolves, and so it's really intuitive, and it's a way to think and to open the possibility or to close the possibility. And when I see what happened with Bordeaux, so I was a little bit surprised, much more as what I could imagine. So it means if you don't trust in your way to think and your way to bring together the things, you can just have what you know before. And if you engage a process and you have much more as what you could imagine, you could not imagine everything. It's not possible because your imagination is a little bit linked to your experiences. So if you don't bring together different things, okay, maybe it could work. I think maybe in physics, in chemistry, in science, it's the same. If you don't experiment, you don't get the first step. So you need to take risk. If not, you don't open the gate. And Bordeaux was really, I could not, so it's a small pocket linked to Taiwan. It's just, the environmental gallery is 2 hectares. It's nothing, it's not nothing, but it's 2 hectares. And when you are inside, it looks like you are in the city center, and it looks like you are, I don't know, the scale changed radically. So it works much more as what you could imagine.
One other aspect of that difference between Bordeaux and what you're doing now is that the inputs required to maintain an alpine garden in Bordeaux or an arid garden in Bordeaux requires a lot of inputs. It looks like once the project is set in motion in Taichung, it doesn't look like it needs a lot of inputs.
Si. That's a huge mistake.
Yeah.
It needs, because even you let the system, it's like your skin, even you let the system doing the job, you need to have a look. And if not, it becomes wild. And what we do, it's always to welcome on the same time plants, animals, but people too. And if it becomes a wild forest, it's not. Maybe it doesn't fit as much with just regular life. So you always need to follow. You always need an eye, even just to understand what happened and to make a choice. You make always choices. If not, it goes. Even you do everything. You put all ingredient to make it one way, but it's cultural. It's cultural. It's always. It's definitively cultural. It means it's definitively an artificial. I mean, artificial act to bring in one way or another way, but it's not in contradiction. It's just the thickness of the line you draw means it's like your hair, if you cut straight or if or if it's wild or what it is. So it's a decision. It's a cultural decision. It's always a cultural decision. And the problem is it's a delicate point for a landscaper, maybe for architects too. If the following is not a good way, you lose the spirit. And it happens much more time as it should, because the spirit is in your brain and you cannot share everything. That's a problem. That's the limit of our practice, for me, for my practice.
Ed?
Thank you for that beautiful talk. I want to follow up on the Dean's comment about inhospitable environments. And Catherine, your comment about, I believe our field has become inhospitable to poetry. And when you said poetry doesn't convince, somehow it doesn't work. And I have to admit, perhaps because of the evening, but when you were speaking, I was thinking of Rimbaud. Par les soies bleues d'été, j'irai dans les sentiers, picoté par les blés, foulé les nus, which is precisely the experience you were describing in your park. And if those sensations, right, if those sentiments have no part in our field, we're deprived, I believe. Something's gone extinct.
Je sais, mais j'ai pas compris. I don't understand the question.
Where's poetry?
No, so if I can rephrase in English. So you have said that you can't sell poetry. That doesn't work. People won't accommodate to the aim of your project if you try to sell it with poetry, so you don't. But I think the question is, isn't there room for poetry? The answer, of course, is yes, right? But he's saying that we are undernourished if we're not able to, to give voice to the poetic.
But we give by doing.
Not by saying.
Yeah. No, okay, so that's very important, sorry. A lot of practitioners, and it's requested, it's just said, they request storytelling. But I have nothing to say. I want to do. And what we do, it has to be accessible for everyone. Not people are not linked to our culture. So the most important is real life. Sorry, it's for me the most important is real life. Is what you feel and what you give to the other. It's not what you say. So each person is different, and each person feels differently. That's just regular life. So, yeah. So poetry is real life. If you are available, if you are just take time to just feel and and what I say, it's true. I am always really, really happy when I see the behavior of the people in what I draw. So I think I do my job. I don't need to tell her how to do and what I need to do. And even for everyone, for the children, when I see that everywhere they ask for children playground, it looks like children cannot play alone with a surrounding. So they need artificial system to play. That's for me crazy. So when you input, it's what you do. So you don't need to explain. For me, but by sure, I am very precise in the demonstration, patati patata. But in fact, the most important is real life. And it's how you bring together the people, how they feel well, how they are inspired, what they see. And I have results, so it could work. So everyone can do it. No, no, it's not a joke. It's not a provocation.
They believe you. They believe you. One more question. Up in the back.
Thank you so much for the sublime and relaxing talk, actually. My question is about, like, what are your values when you're first getting a project? Like, you have this empty space, maybe there's a building or two in there. Where do you start?
I spent, it linked to the competition. The team spent approx 1 month. I can explain for Louvre because it's interesting to understand the place, to read everything, even in France or in everywhere, which is a gift for our practice because you learn from the world. And it's great to learn by working. That's a gift. So when we do, I begin with that because I have a brief, I have performing to do, I have all that, but to be local and not to be a colonial behavior, or I bring myself, I bring what I know to another place. You need to spend time to observe and to understand the feeling and everything. So I begin with that. So when we do, it's a good sample because it's very sparse. So sorry for the architects. I love architecture. I will never be architects, but I love architecture. Louvre, I never met Sana. They never met me. They discovered my work by the exhibit of MoMA. So they were in Tokyo and Paris, and the scenographer in New York. He bring us together. And they speak very badly English. They don't speak French, etc. So the only way to communicate, that's the reason I say it's a language. I was teaching in Philadelphia at the time when they come on place to visit the first time the site. So I never met them. And I sent every week, 1 month, my interpretation of the place, because they were in Tokyo, they don't know France. So I sent all the drawing, all my understanding of the place 1 month, every week. An abstract, a resume, that's it. That you have. And we wait 1 month to get back the first draft of architecture. So with the scenographic, okay, we will not do the competition because we have no building and the brief is a museum, it's not a park. And we get the first building 1 month later. So we were very happy. We ran a lot to make everything. And 2 weeks before, we have 3 months to do landscape, urban development, scenography, and architecture, which is really short. With 3 teams, New York, Tokyo, and Paris. And 2 weeks before, so I continued to work with my process. And the first building was a jewel, a diamond, floating, very nice diamond. So we were happy because nice buildings and are very good architects. 2 weeks before the end of the submission, they changed the building to fit on my landscape. 2 weeks before, I don't ask nothing. And the whole team from my office wanted to stop to work because I push. And 2 weeks before, they changed the building radically to make the fabric, the name fabric from the journalist. And I was shocked too, but they are crazy because I had a diamond, a jewel, and now I have boxes. And I need a weekend to understand that it's a good way to do it. It's much more powerful because it's linked to the whole system. I need 2 weeks myself and to convince my team, no, you need to stay. It's a good answer. They are not crazy. We need to continue. You mean the way you translate the drawing, the way you translate the knowledge in drawing? So Japanese maybe are much more receptive than other architects, but I don't ask them, and it works. And it's the power of that project is a combination between the building and the landscape as a traveling system, as a knowledge through the different timeline. And that is very sparse. That is really powerful. It's much more powerful when it's combined together, when it's just beside, even the best architect. That is a real way to work. We should work all together. And that's the reason I said, and in the second level, that's the reason I said design is a language. So Japanese maybe are great architects and they can read without speaking, that's the best. So because no trouble, no dispute, because you just read the plan and it's okay. And it works like that, the whole process. We always draw really, I draw all, Nishizawa asked me to draw all 30 technical exits, which is difficult to put in nicely, isn't it? He said me, okay, please draw the skylight, draw everything. Yes, I do. All the technical stuff from the building I draw. So it fit with the park. And the best thing, so that's the first level, but what is much more powerful is linked. So the Louvre wanted that project because it was the only project with the capacity of a landscape system and enlarging on the whole land. Because of that project, they asked that the urban development for the 4,000 hectares was managed by a landscaper. Because of that reading. And you know the landscaper is Michel Devigne. We do the same school, we don't do the same work, but it just emphasizes the system because it's the same background. So it means once more, I never met Michel Devigne. We don't need to talk. He just understands and he emphasizes the system. So that's the power of discipline and of the teaching of Michel Courageux. Maybe it's different with other schools. Is how do you understand what you have in front of and what you do with. So it means the time you take to understand what is in front of is not loose and is as much important. And then after it's going fast. The design is going fast. If you understand what you have in front of, the interpretation to make the performing and the technical answer is going fast because you are imprint with all around. So it's just, for me it's normal life, but not as much for many people. And the hybridization between architecture and landscape is too sparse. It's so great and so gift, but it's too sparse. We should push because the result is much more powerful.
You showed that tonight. Thank you. It's extremely inspiring to hear you speak this way and also to look at your drawings and then also to look at the outcomes of the projects. And, my mind goes to what they might look like in 10 years, 20 years.
I'm sorry, the story is not as positive as I would like, but that's what I said. Even for, you can imagine when you do that, you are exigent. And and the way the gardener or the keeper or you can lose. You can lose.
Thank you.
De rien.
Thank you, everyone.